And so leaving Greece and coming into more modern faiths, especially the monotheistic faiths, you don't have, of course, you only have one deity. Monotheistic religions only have one God. And so therefore, those anthropomorphic deities really become non-existent. However, those religions continue to separate humans from nature. So in the Garden of Eden, man, humans, Adam, is given dominion over the rest of the animals. But polytheistic religions still existed for a long, long time, and different deities still existed for a long, long time. And then the idea of the shapeshifter continued on as well. Now, what advantage was there into being a shapeshifter? Well, by studying more modern pre-literate societies, of which we have records, if you could shift your shape, now that's hard to say. If you could shift your shape, you would understand the animal. If you put yourself in the place of the animal, even on a literal level, then you become a better hunter. But of course, if you can shift your shape, you can become that animal and really understand everything it is about that animal. But of course, there are a lot of other conveniences along with being able to do that as well. You can run faster, you can go places, you can even fly. And shapeshifters then occupied quite a bit of folklore and urban legends. Well, even urban legends. I wasn't going to say that, but I did. When the witch craze was going on, witches were often said to turn themselves into cats or other animals, in addition to having their familiars, which were animals. But back to Greek myth before the monotheistic religions. You have probably the first werewolf or the first recorded werewolf, and I'm using that term lightly because it would have been a lycanthrope. And a lycanthrope is a human who turns into a wolf. And of course, the first one, again, recorded is Lycaon in Greek myth. Now, this was a curse. He was turned into a wolf as a punishment by Zeus. And why would then that be such a huge punishment other than the fact that, you know, people were going to be trying to kill you? I'm trying to limit how many times I say you know. Because you are reverted back to that animal state. You are stripped of your logic, you are stripped of your rationality, and you are an animal. So these myths, these folktales, legends, continued on for hundreds and even thousands of years. Now, we know that particular shapeshifter that turns into a wolf as the werewolf. And as I explained in the PowerPoint, were is the Anglo-Saxon word for man, specifically man. Man in Anglo-Saxon did not mean a male human. It was an indefinite pronoun that meant he, she, it, the dog. But where was the designation for a male? And so a werewolf would have been part man and part wolf. I suppose they could have been females. You don't hear that much about female werewolves. But that is where our more modern idea of the werewolf comes about. Now, there are other explanations for the etymology of the word, but that's the best one that I've heard. And this is then where the accoutrements of the werewolf begin to surface. And werewolves then just didn't turn willy-nilly. And also, as opposed to shapeshifters, they could not shift their shape at will. And it was against their will that they turned into wolves. But what are some of the identifying components of a werewolf? Well, it turns into he, she, it turns into the werewolf, the wolf, on the night of the full moon. It is usually against the will of the person who is turning. Werewolves have their third finger, their ring finger, is longer than the other fingers on their hand, and they often have hair on their palms. Now, this is interesting because when we begin to read Dracula, one of the things that Jonathan Harker notices about the Count is that he has hair on his palms. Now, there is another modern, what's the word I want to say? Modern saying about hair on the palms, but we won't go into that. And this is something else about a connection between werewolves and vampires. When a werewolf was killed or died, quite often it was said to turn into a vampire so it doesn't really die. And of course, how do you kill a werewolf? With something silver, something that is pure. So those are just some of the identifying marks of the werewolf. Now, Laocoon aside, he did not ask to be turned into a wolf. And again, neither did the werewolves. And also keep in mind, there are other animals besides wolves that the were creature can turn into. And you see this in the PowerPoint. There are swans, there's all sorts of things. But in the modern world, in the modern depiction of the werewolf, he, she, and it usually is a he, I'm trying not to be sexist here, is often shown as a sympathetic character because this person is racked with guilt and anxiety over the plight of turning into the wolf. And then quite often in modern movies, it is hereditary. Lon Chaney Jr. is one of the most famous wolf men, and he's not happy about it. And aside from being hereditary, well, it is hereditary. If your father was a werewolf, you're more likely to be a werewolf, but you were also turned into a werewolf simply by being bitten by the wolf. And that goes along with a vampire as well. How do you turn into a vampire? You're bitten by a vampire. So the modern image of the werewolf is different than Laocoon in that it's not usually, in the modern world, though it was not only in Greece, but in other places, it was not a punishment for being evil, but something that was against the will. Although in some cultures, very evil people can turn into werewolves. Now, I have not seen the Twilight. I've only seen the first Twilight movie, and I wasn't very pleased with it. But I understand that within the books and the movies that there is a shapeshifter who turns into a wolf. This is that will. This is different from what most modern depictions of the werewolf do show. So that's a short encapsulation of the werewolf. And of course, we could talk a lot longer about the werewolf, but you're going to do that on the discussion boards.